Hello, everybody out there in comic book land. My name is George Serrano, aka The Don, and if you're watching this, you're here for a brand new episode of Major Discourse, our video series where we talk to the latest and greatest in the comic book space. And boy, do we have an episode for you here today. And I'm never alone. I am joined by the fantastic Frank. Frank, let the people know.
Hello.
We are also joined by the King of Hearts himself, Russell Hartman. Russell, tell the people what's up.
What's up, guys? I had to do my best Flash impression to get here as quick as I could, but thankfully I am here.
Hopefully it was Wally, so it was on brand. And ladies and gentlemen, like I said again, this is a fantastic episode. We are here with the Hueytown hero himself, Plutonian's Papa, the father of the Speed Force, the world's finest comic book evangelist, the historian that invented the hypertime. We can't talk truth, justice, and legacy without talking about this man, the legendary Mark Waid. Mark, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for giving us your time here today. First off, congratulations on the decades of incredible work.
Thank you.
Massive success also of Superman Spider-Man #1.
Boy, I can't believe that thing took off like it. I mean, I knew it was going to be big, but second printing and all those alternate covers and stuff. I mean, I can't believe how big that thing ended up being.
Now, this is, I mean, you're a massive fan of Superman. That's something that most people know. What did it mean to kind of personally bridge these two characters together? And as someone who's writing World's Finest and knowing about those two dichotomies, what do you think it is about Peter and Clark that kind of click in a scenario like this?
I think that despite their completely different backgrounds and origins, I think that it's two guys who understand that power brings responsibility. That, I mean, Superman, I think, very much believes that if you have the ability to help people, then you are morally obligated to help people, because that is what we are here to do on this planet. And I think Peter very much plugs into that. So putting them together was a blast because, I'm old enough to remember the very first Superman Spider-Man crossover back in '76, and I was just enamored and enraptured by that book when it came out. And so it is rare after all this time when I started Superman script, to be able to conjure up that child who's all excited, like, I can't believe I'm writing Superman, because I've written so many comics by now. But this was one of those rare times when I started in on this, and I really felt like, I can't believe I'm writing Superman Spider-Man. This is amazing.
That we covered it. Russell was here for that. And at several points in the review, we just kind of were gleeful of just how cool it was on the face of it. Like, I remember, that amazing moment of Clark, I believe in you. We made a whole joke about, like, if Superman says he believes in you, that, your XP and your strength and your heart and your motivation, they just shoot up. It's the best drug on earth. I think it's also crazy full circle moment, because I've heard you say in other interviews that the '76 Superman film is kind of what started this whole journey for you through comics. The idea that then you would come back around and write the crossover for him and with Spider-Man, that has to be fantastic. Were you able to? Was that a big collaborative effort with everyone else on the book, or was it just kind of you and the artist at the time?
It was really just me and the artist. It was, Jorge Jimenez did an amazing job with it, and I gave him the script. Marvel and DC vetted it as they did and as they would. Both sides had to have editorial oversight and stuff, but I got very few notes, which is nice. Everybody sort of understands on both companies by this time that he's written a ton of Spider-Man, he's written a ton of Superman, he kind of knows what he's doing. So that was nice. Gave it to Jorge with the caveat, as I always give the artist that I'm working with, like, it is, here's the script, but you're not an art robot, right? You're not a short order cook. If you see different ways of doing this that are still telling the same story, that we're still pulling in the same direction, and you need to make adjustments here and there, then feel free. And, that is how we ended up with that beautiful 2-page spread early on, where the credits are, where Superman and Spider-Man are coming at us, because that moment wasn't in the script, because I had so many moments and so few pages that I had to cram a lot in. And so when Jorge said, okay, I think I can move some panels around and shorten some stuff up and tighten some stuff without losing the dialogue, without losing the moments, to give us that moment. That was great.
Yeah, he's definitely become a rock star in the industry,
Yeah.
and I follow him as well, and he is equally as gleeful that he got to work on something like this. You gotta
Yeah.
imagine this is bucket list stuff, right? The idea of
Oh
doing
yeah,
one or the other.
he was as excited as any artist I've ever been working on anything. He was that excited. Yeah.
I will confess, I did not grow up a massive fan of Superman, and
Right.
I think it's because, as a '90s kid, we were the first decade to not get a feature film that defined him.
That's
The
true.
'80s got one, '70s got one. Obviously, we'll go on to Returns and then the Snyderverse and all that stuff there. Um, Now that I understand him, I get him. He's amazing. I
Yeah.
almost can't remember a time I didn't understand him. But what do you think it is about? Um, the layman or Hollywood, what are they misunderstanding about this character that I believe is one of the most misunderstood characters that exists?
I think James Gunn's got it down cold. I mean, that's the good news is I think it's in good hands now. I think
Awesome.
James gets it. That Superman's Superman took a vow early on with all of this power that he can do, with the fact that he can do anything. Preserving life in all its forms is the top of his list of priorities. And so, no murder, no killing, no easy shortcuts, because he knows that if the public sees him taking shortcuts, if they see him taking the easy way out, then they're going to trust him less. Because if he comes after that guy, you know, what's to keep him from coming after us? The
Yeah.
fact that Superman depends upon the trust of all humanity to do what he does. And the moment he slips up in that, and the moment he gives them a reason to distrust him, then he becomes a weapon, right? Then he looks like a weapon to them rather than a fireman who is there to help you.
Yeah. I think that it's funny that that was even a point of contention, right? Like the idea that he would save
Yeah.
a squirrel is like, I don't know
Yeah.
if, of
But
course he
that's one of the
would.
best moments in the movie. That's exactly him. Yes.
Yeah, of course he would save that squirrel.
Yeah.
Um, I uh I found myself really gravitating towards the character when he had a son because it was the first time I heard him espouse the reasons why he did things. And I
Yeah.
think that sometimes that ends up kind of getting lost when you're writing a character that's been around for as long as he's been around.
Yeah.
Talking, we're closing in a decade. We'll be closing in on 100 years of the Man of Steel,
Right.
and
Right.
that's crazy even on the face of it. Um, what was it about the character that you gravitated towards? Because I believe that every writer, every person who's ever done an adaptation of Superman has a
Mhm.
different thing about the character that they almost see themselves in, or sometimes see something that they want to aspire to.
Well, that's just it. I mean, that was more the latter to me. That I was a kid in a broken home who didn't have a whole lot of friends and didn't have a whole lot of uh, hope for the future. Frankly, I mean, I kind of didn't see where my life was going. And when I was a teenager and I saw the Christopher Reeve movie, I saw a character who cared about everybody, whether no matter what your background was, and I felt seen. I mean, I knew it was a fictional character, but I still felt seen in that moment when I connected with that character. And so I came out of that movie theater knowing that for the rest of my life, it was going to have something to do with Superman, no matter what I did. So that was what reached me, what touched me. And I think moving forward, I think that because so much of my moral code and my ethics is owed to Superman and superheroes in general, that's what I still find in them. I mean, I don't oversimplify. It's you know they're characters created for adolescents. I mean, they appeal to all audiences, but back in the 30s, they were created for kids,
100%.
and their moral code works in their world because it's a very black and white world. There's not a whole lot of gray area within the DC universe or the Marvel universe. It's very black and white. So I don't want to oversimplify and say if you live your life just like Superman every single day of your life, everything's going to go great for you, because the world is more complicated than that. But that character still being my North Star
Hmm.
as far as ethics and morals seems to have served me pretty well.
Yeah, it comes off in all of your work, especially the stuff that you when you tackle Superman. And I found that And like I said, once you start peeling the layers of this character, I think it's what I mean. He is the first, right? So I just think that there's so much. He is so multi-layered, and one of the things that I like about him is that I think people have this misconception that he is just the best all the time, and once you really kind of get to know the character, you know that he's trying at all
Yeah.
times. He's just trying, and
Yeah,
the
it
effort.
doesn't necessarily come easy for him. Right.
Yeah, the effort just on the face of it is uh, superhuman.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
effort, the restraint, the
Hmm.
patience, all of those things are what's superhuman about it. And
Yep.
I say this to say that did any of your love for the Man of Steel, for Superman, help you in writing what would be the mirror to that, Irredeemable? Because I have read a bunch of evil Superman stories,
Yeah.
and yours has a level of depth and understanding. I not to right, not to discount anybody's take, but
Right.
I feel like you have an understanding of the other side, and thus you were able to make
Hmm.
Irredeemable. Do you think that's how that works?
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think that it is really easy to write evil Superman being a jerk because anyone can write that story. It's not hard to envision. So by the time we got to issue 4, I'd sort of got of Irredeemable, I'd gotten a lot of that out of my system, and it was still, I think, deeper and a little more psychologically driven than just simple, you know, as good as The Boys is, as an example, Homelander's pretty easy to write. It's just, Superman's a dick. But
Yeah, yeah.
and then from there, it really got into the idea of nature versus nurture. If you're raised by somebody other than the Kents, what does that do to you? If you have the powers, but not the, you know,
The guidance,
not the
right?
not the guidance to
Yeah.
do what you're doing, what does that lead to? And I think that gave me something that seems to it sustained for 3 years and is still a high water project. I think in my resume, I'm very happy with that. And but yeah, Irredeemable could not have existed without my deep love and knowledge for Superman. No.
I say I bring up Irredeemable in response to, or in this conversation about me understanding Superman, because there's a certain panel that I think encapsulates Superman almost wholeheartedly, which is the
Mhm.
moment where the Plutonian can hear everyone all at the
Mhm.
exact same time. Any
Yep.
conversation that he's having means he's not saving somebody.
Right.
Anytime Clark decides to go and have Chinese food with Lois, there's a
Yep.
plane crashing here, a bus
Right.
crashing
There's a
here.
volcano going off
Yeah,
in the Fiji Islands or something. Right. Exactly. So
yeah,
that's the thing about that's part of the burden of being Superman. By the way, I other people get to talk in this podcast, right? I'm just saying.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, 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 yeah. No,
okay.
that was
Okay.
my button, to
All
be
right.
completely honest.
Just making sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We're spreading all the weight around.
All right.
Frank.
Um, well, okay, so I had a couple of things I told myself I was going to ask you, and I can kind of transition the one from what George was just talking about. So, you did Evil Superman with Irredeemable. I may be the only person in the room that read it, but 20 some years ago, you had Empire, which was
Right.
basically, Doctor Doom took over the world,
Right.
which I thought was great.
Thank
And
you.
then you did Uprising later, but that kind of didn't finish.
It really and it part of it is just because Barry and I both ran out of time on other things that we were doing. It really kind of hangs on Barry's schedule. Barry's got a couple of other scripts, like at least one other script
Okay.
hanging out there, and we hope to finish at some point. Ideally, sometime this year, we'd like to launch a Kickstarter to do a really nice, super upscale collected edition of all the Empire material and put some new stuff in it. So that's kind of the whole card we've got. The other the other point about Empire that might help bring it back into public attention is that, and I haven't made a big deal out of this because I'm not big on announcing this kind of thing until there's some reality to it, but it looks like we're getting closer to an Empire miniseries on TV. So
Ooh.
it's been in development for a little while now, and it has been chugging along at a decent pace with a real sense that this might actually get made. That's no guarantee, and this is why we haven't announced it yet, because I don't believe in, like I said, and I don't believe in just coming out of the gate, because what most fans don't realize is that it is really easy to have some studio throw you a few $1,000s to option the rights to do your property that probably statistically will never get done. But a lot of creators like to get that first and make it sound as if this is, a movie is coming soon and you should be excited when in fact the statistics are against you. So rather than get people's hopes up, I would rather wait until we get really close. Same with Potter's Field, same with a lot of other stuff I've had cooking over the years. There's been a lot of interest from Hollywood and a lot of development work and a lot of money changing hands, but I don't want to, I don't want to go official with anything until we get close. So,
Right. Like you said before we went live, strikes and mergers and everything.
yeah, it has been a particularly fraught last 6 or 7 years in this town. That merger after merger, as much as the strikes, as much as COVID did, the mergers are what kills the momentum on everything, because suddenly both companies that are merging stop what they're doing because they don't know what tomorrow brings. So
Right.
hopefully things will finally get settled down once Paramount owns fucking everything. Yeah.
Well, hopefully that happens, but I'll tell you, if you do a Kickstarter, if you're getting my money.
Great. I'll count on you guys to blast that out if we end up doing it. Okay.
Absolutely.
100%.
Russell, you want a turn?
Yeah, no, please. Oh my God. Wow. Yeah. So this is, yeah. So my question, I guess, first off, you have written Superman, or you have looked at this character of Superman now at so many different points in his existence, whether
Mhm.
it's Kingdom Come, looking at a much older version of Clark, dealing with what happened in that world, Action Comics now with Superboy and his upbringing with the Kents. Your stuff that in with World's Finest, with this great Silver Age tint to the
Mhm.
stories, and in doing that, you've worked with some incredible artists and creative
Yeah.
teams, from Skylar Patridge right now, and Dan Mora, and Adrian Gutierrez, and Alex Ross. Like, how does your process change based on who you're working with? And are there any artists or creative teams you've been on while working on this character that you wish you could do something else with because the relationship was just that great?
Well, Dan Mora in a heartbeat, do anything with him anywhere.
Yeah.
Jorge Jimenez did amazing stuff with the Superman, Spider-Man stuff that I would latch onto him. Chris Somney, who has not done Superman stuff with me, but that is only because we haven't gotten around to it yet, is somebody else. There's a lot of people. I've been very lucky to work with a lot of amazing artists and colorists over the years, and so I'm I'm luckily at a point in my career where I get to pick and choose a little bit, as opposed to just having artists assigned to me. And so I absolutely take advantage of that. But I've been really lucky that way.
Yeah, no, it's apparent to see. I mean, I love, like, I review your Action Comics run right now, and World's Finest for our site, and every issue. I mean, I love it, man. It's some of the stuff I really
Thanks.
love looking forward to reading every month in my polls. Like, it's all such great stuff. And for World's Finest, it's funny, when I agreed to review it for our site, I wasn't exactly caught up. So as George knows, I was like, George, give me 3 days, I'll have it caught up. So I read like 38, 40 issues within
Wow.
like three
Okay.
days.
Yeah.
And I ran with it, and my God, I didn't want to stop. Like,
Thanks.
issue 50 itself. Yeah, I mean, I wrote in my piece that it was a celebration of what makes that book click.
Exactly.
And that story you have with in the beginning, where Zatanna sends them into the dream world.
Mhm.
Um Something about that, how even when these two are in a different plane of existence, Superman and Batman, how even when they're in a place where they're not sure exactly what to do, how they're going to do it, what they're going to do, they still manage to come together and save the world.
Yep.
And the way that you characterize specifically Superman, but also Batman, when you have the chance to write him again in these issues, I feel that, again, this is no knock to any other writers or artists who work on these characters, but I feel your characterization with these characters and the way you understand who they are at their core helps drive your stories forward so much. And I guess the question I'm trying to get to is, what what about Superman, Batman, or any of the characters you write? How do you seem to have such a good grasp on the
Hmm.
characterization of them to write these stories? Because, there's people that can write this. You give them the same basic concept, the story would be totally different.
Sure.
But the heart you bring to these characters, whether it's Action Comics with Superboy, or again with World's Finest with this duo, or even Kingdom Come with how different that was. how do you feel you reach the core of who these characters are despite telling these massively different stories?
I think there's a couple of factors. I mean, one is that I've been reading this stuff since I was 6 years old, so and never stopped, and so I have all that in my head. But beyond that, I just spend a lot of my time thinking about what it would be like to be these characters, not just when they're flying around and punching stuff and doing super feats, but on a moment to moment basis. Like, what is your life like moving through the world if you have superpowers, if you've got super speed, if you've got Daredevil's hypersenses, whatever, and dwelling a lot on that and spending a lot of time then thinking about, okay, what does that do to you as a person? How does that change your perception of the world? How does that change your perception of other people? Um, just I probably spent more time thinking about Superman than anyone who ever lived at this point.
You and me both.
Yeah. And so it is I know these characters better than I know almost anybody around me, you know. And it's just the important thing is always living in that skin and writing those characters completely from the inside out. Like, I don't ever start with, okay, this month I need Superman and Brainiac to fight each other. Wouldn't that be cool? Well, that's an easy way to start, but it's more interesting to me to start with, okay, where is Superman in this moment in time? Like, what is his headspace? If he came up against this particular conflict, what would his issues be? What would challenge him? What would his perception of this situation? What is his perception of the villain? What is his, what commonalities does he have with the characters he's teaming up with? What differences does he have with the characters he's teaming up with? That's a big part of where we start. If you're Superboy doing action comics, what do you have to learn? It doesn't ever start with a plot with Superboy, for instance. It just starts with, okay, what else does young Clark Kent have to learn to become Superman? How do we do that? And then a plot sort of emerges around that. So I think if that's an answer to your question, I think that's probably the best answer I've got.
No, this perfect. Yeah,
Thanks.
and another, I mean, I couldn't have said it better, right? And one thing I wanted to point out, and something a scene in one of your recent Action Comics issue that really stood out to me before I throw it back to George and Frank. There is I forget how many issues back it was at this point, but there's an issue where a kid is bullying Clark at soccer,
Yeah.
and he really wants to get back at this kid, and he wants to use his powers to, well, as
Yeah.
kids do. And he goes to the kid's house at night and he finds out basically that the father is beating up on the kid. He doesn't have a great home life. And he hears that his mom is dealing with the struggles in the hospital at the same time. And all of this is kind of hitting him. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, man, like, even Superman he needed to learn all of these things at one point, and it's just so brilliantly put into this one bit of this issue, and it's just something that encapsulates why I was so glad to be on this episode, like that you just nail, man. And I love
Thanks.
reading your work because of moments like that it's like it might not be the biggest thing, it might not be the galactic warfare, but just a
Yeah.
moment of Clark understanding why he needs to control with his powers and why he needs to become the person who is this beacon for the world. Like,
Yeah.
it's so great to read stuff like that, and
Thank you.
you do such great respect to the characters. So yeah, thank
I,
you.
I have nothing but respect for them. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. George, a little back to you, man.
I was just gonna say that I think one of the things you nail with that character is the level of decency, and it seems like such a small thing in the hierarchy of, he has to, fly and he has to have super strength. That decency seems to really be something that you're able to get across with your familiarity with characters like Superman. Do you ever get territorial? Do you ever see something? Do you ever see something and like, well, he wouldn't actually say that or do that, or in the world? I mean, you wrote
more than you think, probably
okay.
more than yeah. I yes, but at the same time, I have come around to this idea that there's a bunch of different Supermen. Like, there's, everybody gets their it's like, everybody gets to worship at the church of their choice. Everybody gets to look at Superman through their own filter. And I have to sort of swallow. So as long as they get the basics right, he doesn't kill. He always tells the truth. If you can keep those things constant, then I understand there's some wiggle room for how you interpret the character. Yeah, there are times when I read other Superman stories and I wince, but I also have to bear in mind, look, it's not my character. Like it's not my sandbox. I get to play in it, but I don't own the character. I don't get to call up other writers and go, "What the hell have you done?"
3 o'clock in the
Um,
morning.
it, I it's hard to let go of that sometimes because I'm so invested in the character, and when I see somebody mangle it really badly, it hurts. But I just have to figure that it's a blip on the horizon, and people will remember who the real Superman is as we go forward. And like I said, there's room for interpretation. There's room for other points of view as long as you keep certain immutables constant. Then I feel like you're doing some service to Superman. Sure.
Yeah, I think that we've seen other like I think that even in the universe that exists, that
Mhm.
absolute Superman is nailing a lot of the core
Oh
tenets of
yeah,
Superman.
yeah.
And what I liked a little bit about it is we've talked about how the character has evolved and as some parts of his lore deal heavily with like the immigrant allegory
Mhm.
and the you know, and
Yeah.
it feels like absolute Superman came to a world that wasn't going to accept him, that wasn't as willing to
Right.
accept him as mainline Superman. And initially, he starts off as a very rageful character, like almost like
Mhm.
the angel of vengeance for the immigrants, the people that
Yeah.
fall through the cracks of
Mhm.
society. But what meant more was when he fully came around. Like, get
Yeah.
angry, get your anger out, have that spat, be angry. You're allowed to, but eventually, his ability to come back and still have the key tenets of the Superman that we know. Are you digging what they're doing with Absolute Superman at the
Oh
moment?
yeah. Jason Aaron and I talk all the time about
He's amazing.
Absolute Superman. I'm always flattered when he calls to, well, not get my blessing exactly, but
Yeah,
sort of,
yeah.
get my point of view on this. And we had a long talk about Superman before he even started the book. He was very nervous, but I knew he could look. I mean, he was unnecessarily nervous because I knew he had what it took. But we had a long talk about the the things that I call the immutables, the things about Superman that just are constant from incarnation to incarnation that you can't lose without it no longer being Superman. So, and I can't take credit for anything Jason did, but boy, did he run with that and take our conversations to heart. And I just see so much of Superman in his interpretation that I love that book. There's a lot of absolute books out there and I read them all, but that's my favorite.
Yeah, definitely really, really good. You got to believe that a lot of these people are taking notes from, again, your history with this character. 30 years we're coming on to with Kingdom Come.
Yeah.
I don't want to give too much away because you guys did a stellar documentary that's out right now. What was it like revisiting that? I know that you're probably asked these questions multiple times at cons in regards to it. Is it to the point where you sit there and you have your answers, or there's any points in this revisiting of this humongous story where you were kind of challenged as to your journey into getting that book made?
No, at this point, I'm like one of those dolls where you pull the string in the back and you get canned. I'm like a speak and spell when it comes to that. So, after 30 years, I got my answers about Kingdom Come pretty well canned down. So, but that said, it's always fun to talk about. It's always fun to talk about from a 30 years on perspective. And are there things I would have done differently? Or the things I like, especially about it? I mean, all those things are true. I'm just glad mostly that people are still digging it. I'm glad that it has sustained. I am thrilled that people still bring it up to me at conventions without fail. That is the thing I've signed more than anything else. And I have probably signed as many Kingdom Comes as I have everything else put together at this time.
Well,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, you got Boy Thunder coming back around,
Mhm.
doing that review, which was amazing. And again, like already a good book, but to be able to tie it back there, the whole journey of just going back to that universe, it's absolutely amazing. And showcasing other characters in the DC universe. My last question before I pass it over to Frank is that a little bit off air, we were talking about the sheer enormity of a treasure trove of characters that DC has. It deals a lot
Mhm.
in legacy and legacy characters. The Trinity. get the lion's share of attention. But
Yeah.
what's a character you think is just right there on the cusp? And if they got more exposure, if they became more of a household name, people would realize that this was a stellar character
Wow,
from the show.
that's a great question because I think in because of TV, DC's done a really good job. Like my gut answer is Green Arrow, but then the Arrow series lasted 9 seasons, so
Yeah.
I think people get that character. Green Lanterns is coming up in the Lanterns TV show, and I've talked to Damon Lindelof, who I know, and I feel really good. And Tom King, who's working on it, I feel really good about what they're doing. So I think that's going to help. Um, I mean, DC's done a really, especially with Stargirl. I mean, they've done
Oh
such
yeah,
a
man.
deep dive into some of the B-list characters. Um, who else? I mean, Martian Manhunter, other than the cartoon show, has never really gotten a whole lot of play. I know he was on Smallville a little bit, but maybe there's something about that character that could engage a modern audience. I don't know.
I think so. Yeah. Awesome answer. Frank?
Um, well, as I said before we started earlier, I was a little more of a Marvel guy growing up, and I got the Fantastic Four background versus everybody else in Superman. So I guess I'm gonna ask you a little bit about the other side.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of both. So you did history of the DC universe
Mhm.
last year. You did history of the Marvel universe however many years before that. So first of all, I know it's not your department, but I have to grumble. The collected editions,
Yeah.
Marvel has treasury size and regular trade, and then DC has hardcover. You're
Right.
killing me. I want them to see
I
them on
know.
the shelf.
I know.
But that aside, um, and I bought the Marvel one in Treasury and then got mad and bought it in trade, so it was a little
Yeah.
closer to the DC one.
Right.
Fair.
Don't tell my wife. Um, but when you were doing those, I mean, the amount of research and everything putting those together, which one was more challenging?
DC by a mile. DC was
Ooh,
far more challenging.
interesting.
There's a couple of reasons. I mean, one is that with the Marvel one, I'm working for Tom Brevoort, and Tom knows this stuff backward and forward. Tom is to Marvel history what I am to DC history. So, with his guidance, before I even started with that book, he and his team of researchers had sort of put together a bullet point list. It wasn't
Mm.
something I had to be bound to, but it helped remind me of the things that I didn't want to overlook. Um, Whereas with DC, it was just all in my hands. And there's so many reboots and so much muddled with continuity. That was the thing. And also, oh my God, you get to that fourth issue. Like the fourth issue took me as long to do as any two of the other issues because it's event, 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 event. And it's so much. I only have 30 pages. How do I coalesce this stuff down into a few sentences? The the thing that is, I think that what made it most hard, the fourth issue most difficult was that with the other three issues, I was able to introduce characters and spend a little bit more time with this character and that character and who they are and how they came to be. But by the time you get to that fourth issue, there was no time for that. It was just darkest night, blackest night, doomsday,
Just
this,
boom,
this,
boom,
this,
boom,
boom,
boom.
boom, boom. And so I, that was a challenge. That was a real challenge. And I'll be brutally honest. I mean, there's some of that stuff that I hadn't read more than once, if ever. To this day, I don't think I've read Brightest Day from start to finish. Not an indictment of the work. It's just, there's so
Right,
many
just
of those
wasn't.
It's a
books.
lot.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a lot. So that was the biggest challenge by far.
So at any point when you were writing issue 4, did you go back and go, "Hey, can I have a fifth issue, please?"
Oh God, we should have had 5 issues all along. If we had 5 issues, we would have had so much more breathing room. It would have been so much more easier to do. But at that point, the die was cast. It was, if you're going to have more than 4 issues, you got to ask right up front. So yeah, at least I had 30 pages an issue. That helped. But still, as I'm fond of saying, Marv Wolfman and George Perez did their history of the DC universe 40 years ago, and they had 100 pages. I only had 20 more pages to cover 40 more years of DC history.
Jeez.
Oh wow! When you think of it
Yeah.
that way, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Bonkers. Yeah, I wanted to ask when it comes to this new era of DC All In and
Yeah.
its various chapters and stuff. Absolute Universe is taking off. It's what everyone's talking about. Incredible amount of sales, bringing in new readers into the shop.
Mhm.
What do you think it is about All In that's also helping that momentum for DC? Like if you're what are you guys doing on that side of the DC universe that's really exciting readers?
What I think what it is that I have, again, having worked at that company for 40 years, off and on, uh, mostly on, is that I've never seen that level of editorial cooperation that I have at this point. I've never seen an editorial group at DC that is moving so cleanly in the same direction and has basically the same points of view of these characters. Marie Javins, who is the editor in chief there, has done an amazing job of putting the right people together and setting a tone for the DC universe that is consistent, I think, across most of the books. And it doesn't feel like a hodgepodge, random scattershot group of books every month. It feels like it's all part of the same gestalt, the same universe. And I think that's very exciting. I think it's also pretty new reader friendly. And I can't wait for you guys to get, I mean, we think we've already published one or two of these books, but I can't wait for you guys to see what's coming up with the next level
Yeah.
initiative, which is the next part, which is some of the other launches that are coming up that are, again, intended to be very new reader friendly, not ignoring continuity, not ignoring the rest of these universe, but concentrating on, letting that one character or that one book have some room to breathe and grow before you start folding in the Justice League or what have you.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And there's a
Yeah.
reverence I feel like these writers have for these characters. I don't know if that's something that you mandatorily have to do. Do you have to go back and read issue one of every character as part of? Yeah, I would assume that that helps. Where do you make the decision as far as the amount of research? I guess you personally, but also any advice to
Right.
writers?
I
Yeah,
I mean,
because I think it might be a little bit different.
I always try to start with, and I encourage others to start with author intent. I encourage you to go back to the earliest publications of these characters, the earliest incarnations, and doesn't mean you're locked into that, but just pay attention to what made that character work at the beginning and what the intent of that character was and what the personality of that character was. And because that, whether it's Firestorm or Lobo or whoever, these are characters that clearly clicked and worked and have been around for a long time, where there's so many other characters from the 80s that didn't. Nobody's publishing a Sun Devils book right now. No one's publishing a Spanner's Galaxy book. But you're, we're still doing Firestorm. So go back, look at what made that work, and then expand out from there. It doesn't mean you have to read every single Firestorm book, although it wouldn't hurt you to just look over the wiki entry.
Right.
But that's what I encourage younger and beginning writers to do, is just, you're not bound by it, but just be informed. You don't have to feel like you're straitjacketed by what has happened before, but just be informed by it, because you will also find, more often than not, it sparks ideas in you, or it gives you a new perspective on those characters you hadn't thought about, that also then lends itself to other ideas for you as a writer.
Interesting. I got one more writing
Yeah.
question. When these ideas are coming up, what is the order of events? Is it, hey, Mark, we need you to write this book, and then you're sitting there brainstorming, or are you brainstorming and then you're going to the powers that be and say, hey, I have a Batman Robin idea?
It's the other way. It's basically just, a little bit of both. Like Batman and Robin's an example of where Chris Samney and I said, hey, look, we've got an idea for something we want to do as Batman and Robin year one. And then it's assigned to an editor, and then the editor and I work together to sort of flesh out the story and so forth. So, but I'm not. I mean, I guess it works both ways. Whereas with an ongoing series like World's Finest or whatever, I don't get the story handed to me. It is up to me to pitch it to the editor, but still, they get final say, as they should. They're the ones who are the custodians of the characters for the company. So that's kind of the way it works. I haven't pitched a whole lot of things lately that have not been greenlit. There will come a point, I'm sure, where that will go away. But for the time being, I'm enjoying that power.
Yeah, 100%. Well deserved. Also, by the way, I think all that stuff works well. Um, with with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Was it fun writing Spidey in that
Oh, sure.
crossover as well?
Oh, sure. I mean, I've written a ton of Spidey,
Yeah, but like
and
back
yeah,
around in this world, sort of.
yeah, yeah, because the contrast is great too. I mean, he can be funny. I mean, Superman is has a sense of humor. Superman appreciates, the quips and the lines and the banter and stuff, but he's not that guy, you
Right,
know.
right.
So to give him somebody to play off of who is funny, I mean, that's the whole reason why Robin is in World's Finest. Because
That's true.
traditionally, World's Finest for the longest time has been Superman and Batman.
Hmm.
And I deliberately put Robin in there because I thought, okay, finally, I've got somebody in there who has a sense of humor, who can make the jokes and the wisecracks. And that opened up a whole lot of character stuff for me in that book. And it made it just that much more fun to write.
Got it. Hats off to the responsibility line in that. In
I that I will say
that.
that was a gift. That was I still buy a lot of comics off eBay. I still buy a lot of Silver Age books here and there, like upgrading my collection and stuff. And I bought some, and some seller had recognized my name and had scribbled that line of dialogue on their,
On the packaging.
on their receipt or whatever. And I wrote them back and said, I'm totally stealing that line. That is a great line.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Hey, wherever you can get it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Russ. I feel like I'm taking up all this time, brother.
No, it's totally okay. So as George and Frank know, besides Superman, I'm a huge Incredible Hulk guy. And you had a really interesting take on the character with Indestructible.
Yeah.
Um, so I was just curious what your thoughts are. How did that story come together? What made you kind of want to look at the Hulk as more of like, hey, you know, let's use him as this more, let's direct him
Right.
as this weapon type, and whereas other writers hadn't taken that kind of route with him. And if you would ever want to revisit the gamma crazy world of the Incredible Hulk again.
No, but there's a reason for that. But we'll come back to that in a second.
Okay.
But to answer the first part of your question, whenever I take on a character, I like to look at, like I said, the broad history of the character, but also think about A, what have you never seen this character do before? And B, what is there some perspective that this character has gained over the years that maybe hasn't been explored? With Daredevil, it was, oh my God, all these horrible things keep happening to me. I either have to wallow in misery or I have to start faking it until I make it. With Bruce, it was, look, for how many, 60 years of Hulk, it's always been, I'm looking for a cure, I'm looking for a cure, I'm looking for a cure. And clearly it is a chronic condition. Clearly being the Hulk is not something he can cure. So I took on for those who haven't read the book, my perspective on it was, okay, Bruce has finally accepted the fact that it's like any other chronic disease. It's something he's going to have to live with. So given that, how can he make the best out of this? So he goes to Shield and he says, look, if you'll help me create stuff, you'll give me resources to use my science and use my abilities to create things for the world that are better. In exchange, I will be your weapon. Hulk will be, Hulk is your cannonball. You fire the cannon at whatever you think Shield thinks is the most appropriate target at this moment, and the Hulk will be your cannonball for you. And that take, I think, worked out really well for a while. I enjoyed doing that. Had a great time with it. I would never go back because Hulk fans are crazy. Hulk fans are nuts. Hulk fans are the loudest, angriest fans in all of comics. And every time I had the Hulk be challenged by something, Twitter would be ablaze with all the people who remember the time that he extinguished the sun with a clap of his hands or whatever.
Right.
Like, I can't.
I
I
get it.
can't live by that
Yeah.
because then it just becomes then nothing can stop him. That's then what there's no conflict there whatsoever with a character. So it's eh, that was they were challenging. The Hulk fans, God bless them, were challenging to deal with.
Well, I can
There
tell you,
is
Mark, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. So I thought it was a really cool concept. And like
Thank
you're
you.
saying, like a lot of, I think there's something to that, how, so many people look at it as like this disease that needs to be cured. Whereas, okay, I have to live with this. What could I do to make this better for me
What
in
can I
this
do? Yeah,
body?
well, how can I do
Yeah,
use this to be
yeah,
a net positive in the Marvel universe? Exactly.
yeah. I love that idea. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I do love your observation that Hulk fans are angry. It's kind of on brand.
Yeah, it is my brand.
I think they might see themselves in the character a little bit. That
Yeah.
might be a little bit of what's going on there. My gosh. Um, are you excited at all? Will you be there front row for Supergirl this summer?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yes, by a long shot. I think that I've always loved the character. I liked the source material that Tom King and Dope Selvi did with uh, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. I I like the trailer as it is. I've seen everything. I've seen a little bit of stuff behind the scenes. It it's really coming together nicely. I'm really excited for it, and I'll be there.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm really, really digging what's going on over there. And I know that you were a fan of the Superman film,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Really, really
I
dug.
yeah. I the genius of that movie, and frankly, Fantastic Four 2 weeks later, which had the same take, is that up till that point, almost all superhero movies were here is the world around us, and the superhero is the fantastic element in this otherwise grounded world, right?
Hmm.
Whereas with the Superman movie, it was exactly the opposite. It was here's the crazy world that superheroes live in. They've always been around. Come join us. We're going to open the door and let you visit our world. And again, same thing with Fantastic Four. It felt very much the same way. So I love that. I think that was a big part of the appeal. It didn't feel like you were trying to justify why Superman acts a certain way given the world around us. Didn't matter. We're in his world.
Yeah, that world building, and I remember watching the Fantastic Four and be like, "This is the first Marvel movie in a while where everyone doesn't hate the superheroes that are
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
world." I'm like, I'm glad that they actually fans. Um, how does it feel to be able to play with characters like Batman and Superman with more levity and more humor? I felt like at a certain point, this universe was pigeonholed as supposedly having to be a more dark adult version
Yeah.
of not of the Marvel universe, but you get what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that's the audience
Yeah.
that they were targeting. I feel like those characters almost don't work with that without that levity and without that brevity or stuff like that. How does it feel to be able to use those tools at your exposure without having addition, a whole liner of notes of like he needs
No, I
to
mean,
be darker
it'd
and
be
gritty
great.
and
I mean, that's the thing. Like you said, you can't have these characters without some degree of levity here and there. It doesn't mean they should be wacky or goofy, but at the same time, there's just no balance to your story if there's not some even Casino Royale is a dark James Bond story, but even it has its moments of levity. I mean, it's you need that contrast to make the darker moments even more serious or you feel even more important. So it's good that I'm not I don't I've always written my characters like that, and there's been periods of comics where the fan point of view has been no, they got to be a lot more grimmer and serious than that. But I think we're in a period where that isn't the case anymore.
I think people are kind of starving, like I said again, for decency and
Yeah,
and a moral
and for just
compass.
lighter, not inconsequential stories. I mean, look at my example is Star Trek: Strange New Worlds,
Yeah.
which is the epitome of classic storytelling, optimistic, bright but not inconsequential, and sort of self-contained. And the fact that the audience is there for that was is very heartening. I think it's the same with World's Finest. It's the same with some of these other books that I'm doing where I feel like, okay, this is the current appetite of the audience that we just want to be entertained.
Yeah. That's a core tenement of this whole industry that I think that sometimes people may lose sight of. Um,
Yeah.
Russ, Frank, as we close this out, do you have any further questions?
Um,
Um, Frank, yeah, go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
Actually, I got one if it's okay. I
yeah.
promised my friend that I would ask this if I had a chance, Mark.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to World's Finest. This is
Yeah.
part his question and part mine. Just talking about your love of Supergirl and using Robin as the levity.
Yeah.
So my part of the question is, what gave you the idea for their quote unquote relationship throughout the course of
Oh,
that
the
series?
date.
His
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
part is his
Yeah.
part is what gave you the idea to use the Floronic Man as a villain in an Aquaman story. I don't think anybody ever did that before.
No, and I couldn't tell you to save my life where that came from. But but the Robin Supergirl stuff, it's because I'm always, like I said earlier, I'm always looking for ways of doing things with the characters you've never seen before. And when I realized I had to have those two characters together in World's Finest #2, my immediate instinct was to write Dick Grayson as a horn dog who has a crush on Supergirl because it's perfectly in character.
Mhm.
But we can don't write a story that the audience can write for you. I
That's
they
true.
we know that. So let's come up with an angle that you hadn't expected. So this idea that they have a history, uh, not not an ugly history, but just a comically unpleasant history, and they're icy to each other was a lot more interesting to me, and it certainly has made for a lot of stories that have come out of that. So the audience really responded to that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a blast.
Awesome.
Do you think anybody
Thank you.
will anybody else will pick up on that in like modern day books?
I don't know. I mean, it's my feeling is it's been enough time since World's Finest days that they probably managed to
Get
patch
it?
things
Yeah.
up a little bit. But
Bury the
but
hatchet.
if people want to pick up on it, I'm all for it.
Yeah. That makes sense. Russ?
Cool.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, I'll wrap up my final question here.
Yeah.
When I was younger and I was watching Superman the animated series in the 90s, it introduced me to so many of the characters from his world, and one of those was Mr. Mixus Pitlick.
Who I love.
And
Yeah.
I loved in World's Finest when you had the whole arc with the imps and Mr. Mix's Pitlick and
Yeah.
Batmite and like that the art in that was just so like off the wall. And like what about the imps, Mr. Mix's Pitlick, Batmite, that whole like kind of dimension of DC? What made you want to put them in that arc, and what do you like about those two and their like little family that you felt like you needed to include them?
I think we get back to levity. We get back to the idea that there's room for levity in these books, and they're just so much fun to write. Bat Knight and Mixes Piddly both, and the underlying point of that whole story, and Batman pretty much just nails it right on the head and just says it right to the readers, which is that as far as the Batman world goes, there's a time and a place, and maybe this isn't the time for Batmite, but let's go have one last adventure together.
Awesome.
And I think that's very true. I don't think that Matt Fraction should be using Batmite in his run,
Fair.
for instance.
Right.
It's really off brand right now. But that was kind of a way of using that character to underscore that uh, he's off brand right now, but that doesn't mean he's a stupid character. It just means this isn't the right time for Batmite.
That
I
makes
love
a lot
it.
of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Mark, thank you so much for giving us your
Sure.
time. Real quick, the entire reason why this organization exists and it actually hits 10 years in a week is because at one point in my life, I had lost my father and felt a little bit
Sorry.
wayward, as you were talking about before. I often say comic books have saved my life. I've heard you say things like Superman has saved yours.
Saved my life.
Um,
Yeah.
and when people ask me why I feel that way or inspired or the aspirational parts of the medium, I always say that people think that I am inspired particularly by Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, and I am, but I'm more so inspired by the regular person writing the inspiration in those
Oh,
stories.
that's
I'm the
nice.
regular
Yeah.
hope writing those inspiration in those stories. Oftentimes we see these characters and we're like, how do we relate to them? And it's like
Mhm.
I'm relating to you, like
Oh,
you're
that's nice. That's
you're the one
nice.
putting your heart into it
Yeah.
and giving it out to other people. You live in as good or as bad of a world as you perceive the same
Right.
world. So if someone is looking outside their window and doesn't think that the world is as it should be, you're still giving them spoonfuls of sugar and hope and optimism that was given to you at such a
Yep.
pivotal time in your life.
Yep.
And I just have to thank you for
No,
continuing.
my pleasure. Thank you. That's the whole goal. Thank you.
I feel like you're passing it on, and it's led to this success. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for continuing to be an evangelist for this medium. If no one's talking about it, I know we're both gone. So I know
All right. Okay.
thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. Hopefully we'll get you in here again. This has been a tremendous conversation and definitely a bucket list moment, I think, for several of us
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Not that I'm planning
Oh,
to do
yeah,
that
yeah.
anytime soon,
All right.
but thank you
Great.
so much.
You bet.
And yeah, I will talk to you.
All right. Take care, guys. I'm signing out
Thank
now.
you so much.
And you bet.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Mark.
Yeah.
Enjoyed this very much. Take care.
Thank you so much, Mark.